I'm not going to do a big introduction of Dink NeSmith. I put his bio on your table. I also put a lot of his editorials. Dink has been very fortunate, been very gracious to me, and he sends me his weekly editorials. He writes in the Jesup newspaper, an editorial on Wednesdays, and on Sunday mornings you can find him editorials in the Athens newspaper. I encourage you to read those because there's a lot of nostalgia, there's a lot of what we can do to save our country. Dink has many things we could talk about, but two is he is part of over 30 newspapers in the Southeast, not the Atlanta Journal. He has not been called by Rupert Murdoch this week, but give him time. Dink could be his answer and solution in the United States. But many of the Jesup newspapers and many of the Highlands, North Carolina, in those newspapers. His other distinguishing fact is he is vice chairman of the Board of Regents. As we go to get our funds, he has assured me in the dean that there will be no problems from that standpoint. I think that's what he said. I wasn't hearing too well. I was very fortunate to meet Dink through my banker and friend, Natalie Schweers, who has joined us, and a good friend of Dink and his family. And she introduced me about a year ago, and I met him in Athens, and we started talking. And not only do we do business together, but we've developed a friendship. He comes to Augusta frequently because he's on the Georgia Health Sciences University boards. Used to be called the Medical College of Georgia, but from that. And those who are not Georgia Tech fans will appreciate that he was one of the deciding votes to bring the engineering school, parts of engineering degrees to the University of Georgia. So and I've put many of his editorials on your table, and I would tell you to read them. My favorite one is about Dink is a leadership man, and everything and where he speaks is about leadership. At one time, he was in charge of a line of people working in a chicken factory, and they had to go into the bottom of the chicken, is the way to describe it, and remove some of the parts. And the women really weren't inspired to do this. So Dink, thinking, and the type guy he is, took them over to the turkey factory, and they had to use two hands to do this. And so the women came back all inspired. And so that's one of the editorials that I thought was really good, or one of the nostalgia things. So without further ado, I bring up my friend Dink NeSmith.
Thank you, Abram. Thank you. I was a little nervous about Abram introducing me. We know each other so well. I thought it'd be kind of like having a kidney transplant from a chronic bedwetter. I just wasn't quite sure what it was going to be like. Well, thank you, Abram. Thank you, Cookie. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dean. You all know why you're here. Let me tell you why I'm here. About 4 months ago, my friend and CPA, Abram Serrata, called and said, Dink, I know you're in the newspaper business scattered across the Southeast, but really, tell the truth. I said, okay, I can tell the truth. He said, do you believe in free speech? I said, absolutely. He said, good, because I want you to give one on July 21st at Terry College. So here I am. Well, they're trusting me with technology here, too. I'm a little nervous about that, Dean. I did go to the Grady School, but they did not recognize double majors back in those dark ages. And I took all of my electives in the business school in the old CJ building, and so I really feel at home among the business school. And I tell our people, you have to be a good business before you can be a good anything else. So you got to be able to count and have strategy, and so I really do appreciate it. But I almost didn't get to come to the University of Georgia. I'm from Jesup, down it's south of McRae, about 80 miles below McRae in Lumber City. And my mother was nervous about her only son going to the University of Georgia. I said, well, Mother, why? She said, it's too big. There are 13,000 students in Athens. You'll get in trouble. I says, Mother, well, where would you have me go? She said, well, all good Baptist boys go to Mercer. You should go to Mercer. I said, Mother, they've offered me a scholarship to Mercer, but no, ma'am, I don't want to be in Macon. I want to be in Athens. That's the 50-yard line of where I want to be. Well, my dad called a truce. He said, y'all just think about it, pray about it. And so I said, I will. And I came back a couple of days later and I said, Mother, I have decided. I've got it narrowed down to 2 places that I want to go. She said, oh, well, what would they be? I said, I want to go to the University of Georgia or enlist and go to Vietnam. She said, oh my goodness, I think the University of Georgia is a wonderful place for you to be. So that's how I got to the University of Georgia. And that set the course. And if our family ever gets together for a meal such as you're having this morning, there are 16 feet under the table that have all walked across the stage to receive a total of 10 degrees from the University of Georgia. So yes, we love UGA. And we love the Terry College, too, for what you're doing to make our state much better. Well, I'm going to trust my technology skills here. Adam was the first man on earth, according to the Bible, and he's the first man in technology at the Terry College, and he's shown me that if I can just press this one button, I can make it up. Now, baby, if it gets to be 2 buttons, you're going to have to come help me, okay? Well, I was in a college town the other day, and it was Parents' Weekend, and I saw this sign on Joe's Bar and Grill. And what did it say? It said, students, bring your parents to lunch and we'll act like we don't know you. Well, the Baptist preacher down the street didn't want to miss out on that opportunity, so he put on his marquee, students, bring your parents to church this Sunday and we'll act like we do know you. That'd be good, wouldn't it, Ham? Well, speaking of churches, I'm reminded of what Billy Sunday, the great evangelist, once said. He said, very few souls are won after 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to get on through this pretty quickly if I can. Well, and I'm going to plunge into the assignment that Abram gave me. You know, I had to listen to him. He said, talk about the Board of Regents, and so, well, I will. Well, 3 years ago, Governor Sonny Perdue called me and he said, Dink, I'd like for you to consider to be on the Board of Regents. I said, well, Governor, that would be an honor. Since it was founded in 1932, there have been only 2 other regents from Athens on the Board of Regents. The publisher of the Banner Herald was the first one, and then later in the 70s, Julius Bishop was invited to be on the Board of Regents, and so it's been about 30 years since somebody's been there. I think I'd be honored. I love the state of Georgia, and I would like to give back to it if I could. I said, but Governor, how much time does it take? He said, oh, you only meet about 7 or 8 times a year. And I said, well, I probably can work that in. Well, early in my newspaper career, I was challenged by a city commissioner in the city of Scriven to say I misquoted him. Mr. Ralph Woodall was just really bearing into me about what I had said he said in the paper. And I said, well, look, Commissioner, here are my notes, and I got a cassette tape recorder. Some of you don't even know what that is, but we had a cassette tape recorder, and I've recorded. I'll let you listen to it. He said, no, I don't care what you wrote. You just misunderheard what I said. I said, well, I guess I did, and I guess I misunderheard, Dean, what the governor said about that 7 or 8 times a month, because it's about, 7 or 8 times a year. It's about 7 or 8 times a month with the committee meetings and the conference calls and the go here and the go there, but I really am enjoying it. Well, as you might know, there are 35 institutions scattered around this state, and we've got 4 research universities, and one of them, as Abram alluded to, is now the Georgia Health Sciences University, which used to be the Medical College of Georgia. Well, we've got an annual budget of $6.5 billion to deal with, so there are a lot of moving parts. We had 311,000 students when we wrapped up in the spring, and we're estimating, Dean, we're going to have 320,000 students this fall. Our enrollment is going up 11+%, and then our funding has gone down about 25%. So we're having to sharpen that pencil, Abram, and figure out what to do. Also in all of this, we got 41,460 faculty and staff. So a lot of personnel issues going on there too. And this total impact is $12.6 billion a year. So we believe that we are a major player in what happens in the Peach State. But as Georgians, we should all smile because we're one of 4 states out of 50 that have 2 or more universities ranked in the top 25. Georgia Tech is number 7, UGA is number 18 in the U.S. News and World Report at best public universities. And then, of course, we know that University of Georgia is ranked 5th by Princeton Review. We won't talk about that other review that they have, that we did so well, we were on in that, but 5th in best value. So see, my mother really did get a good investment for, I think it was $115 a quarter when they shipped me off to Athens in 1966. But today, I want to paint a big picture, one that I think is just right for the state of Georgia. In The Tale of Two Cities, what did he say? It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Who among us would argue that these aren't the worst times that many generations have seen in America? But I would say, I would counter to that to say, this would be the best of time to think about the future. What are we going to do about the future? It's not always going to be this way. Well, when you compare Georgia to European cities or countries, we're just in our infancy. We're just a child. So, Craig, I would say to my fellow 10 million Georgians, what do we want to be when we grow up? So let's plan today for tomorrow and the days after tomorrow. Well, this is an idea that I pitched to my fellow Regents because I believe Georgia, the university system of Georgia, can be the catalyst and the facilitator for brainstorming to pull together all of our many resources geographically, physically, financially, and otherwise. We can pull them all together. We can pull them all together to form some type of global brand. I believe that we could develop a brand. We know about Silicon Valley. We know about the Cleveland Clinic. We know about Mayo Clinic. We know about Wall Street. We know a little bit too much about Wall Street right now, don't we? And then, of course, we've got the Research Triangle over in North Carolina. Well, Warren Buffett, who is the leading brand investor in the world, says Silicon Valley is not only the number 1 technology, innovation, and entrepreneurial activity, it's number 2 and number 3. It claims the first 3 spots. Well, you know how they keep that rolling? Because they tracked venture capital. It's all funded by venture capital. And if Georgia is going to be a global player, we've got to attract more global venture capital into the state of Georgia. So what does Georgia have? Potentially, I say it has more. We just need to recognize what our niche is and then figure out what we're going to do to brand it. When we figure out our brand, then it's up to all of us to stoke the fires and make that brand sizzle. And I believe that the Terry College can be at the heart of that with your brain power and your marketing ability. The Terry College could really embrace this initiative. So what will our brand be? Well, I believe what's happening in Augusta and Athens and Atlanta and Columbus and beyond, we could pull all of this together and it could be the launching pad for a potential brand in perhaps biomedicine, maybe regenerative medicine. We could pull it all together. Well, I'm a newspaper man and I don't really know that much about medicine other than going to the doctor and I feel better when they give me the right medicine. But what if we could develop a brand like Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic in an area of research in medicine right here in Georgia? We can do it. So let's take a look at a partial inventory of the assets that we have in our arsenal of possibilities. Over in Augusta, their medical community has a $7 billion annual impact. They've got 1,600 physicians. Count them, 11 hospitals. 2 huge players in the Augusta market are the Georgia Health Sciences University, formerly MCG, and Fort Gordon. Fort Gordon is the nation's largest burn center. It has the Warrior Transition Battalion, and they're doing some amazing things in the active duty spinal cord area. Well, the military has always been a key driver in medical innovation, and they've introduced general surgery, blood transfusion, antibiotics, penicillin, and into the U.S. healthcare system. And Georgia has the largest veteran population and the 4th largest in the nation active duty population. So the military is an important economic driver in the state of Georgia. America has spent hundreds of billions of dollars, we all know, on war in the last decade, and they're going to spend tens of billions of dollars on health care for the injured young men and women who have been protecting our freedom across the globe. And as we can develop more of that research and in this medical area, well, it'll only benefit the other 10 million people in the state of Georgia. Well, Home Depot co-founder Bernie Marcus has invested right here in Atlanta over $130 million in neurologically related research, treatment, and rehab right here in Atlanta. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Imagine the possibilities that if we could harness the genius of all of those folks that retire early over at Savannah River site just across the river from Augusta. Think of all of those bright minds that we have, thousands of them, that we could harness and get them excited about what we're doing. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Now drive 100 miles on I-20 and then exit up to Athens and consider the University of Georgia and all of the energy and research and the potential that is there in Athens at the University of Georgia. Well, teamwork really works, so we can't stop from Augusta just into Athens. We got to stay on I-20 and we got to drive on over to Atlanta. And just imagine what we have in Atlanta that 49 other states would be delighted to die for. Think about it. We've got the busiest airport in the world, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. It's a wonderful thing until you try to get out of there sometimes or try to get in. But it's a great thing, a part of our brand. We've got the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. We've got it here in Atlanta. We've got Emory University and its medical community here in Atlanta. We've got the Shepherd Spinal Center here in Atlanta. We've got Georgia Tech. Whether we want to admit it or not, it's a global brand. And we need to harness Georgia Tech's firepower into the total state. We've got another research university. We've got Georgia State. We've got the Georgia Research Alliance. And of course, we can't overlook Morehouse's School of Medicine or even Mercer's School of Medicine. And then, if you've been following the news, we're working on an initiative to get Fort McPherson from the U.S. Army. Maybe it could become a central, a 50-yard line of technology development, and we could use it as a campus and a centerpiece in this branding effort. Well, and then in Atlanta we have a lot of foundations, but the crown jewel is the Woodruff Foundation with its related organizations, $8 billion worth of resources. Think about Georgia if we removed the Woodruff Foundation from the state of Georgia. What would we be? What would we be? Of course, we are so grateful to the late Robert W. Woodruff for his benevolence and his vision. Of course, I loved his saying. He said, "There's no limit to what can be accomplished when it doesn't matter who gets the credit." Imagine what we would be without the Woodruff Foundation in Georgia. But it's not just Coca-Cola money. Think of all the other Fortune 500 companies that we have in Atlanta. If we could embrace them and get them excited, along with Bernie Marcus and others, if we could get their wallets involved in this branding effort, imagine what we could do, Dean. Who could really ask for more? Well, we have more. If you continue driving that way from Atlanta, another 100 miles, you get to Columbus, and there is Fort Benning. Of course, it's one of the most explosively growing military bases in the country. And pound for pound, Columbus might be one of the most innovative and generous communities in America. If we can get them harnessed into it, wow. But you know, I wouldn't leave out Savannah and its port, or Macon, or Valdosta, or Rome, or any other communities in this state that would want to get involved, because we really have the perfect location, geographic location, to connect globally for a brand. And also, I'm a firm believer in the ingenuity of Georgians and their can-do spirit. We can do. Billy Payne proved we can do pretty much whatever we decide we want to do. Well, as a member of the Board of Regents, I do see all of this coming together, and we can use our economic development arm to work with these different agencies. But they'd say, well, how would it happen? Well, if you ask Alan, Emily, and Eric with their University of Georgia degrees about me, they'd say, well, Dad could be wrong, but he's never in doubt. Well, I do have an opinion about a few things, and that's why you've invited me here today. This is what I would do, Ham. This is what I would do. I would get representatives from all of these different segments, these assets that we have in Georgia. I'd get them in a room much like this one, and I would say, ladies, gentlemen, we want to put a man on the moon in 6 months. You got 6 months. Come back to us and tell us what are the top 3 things that we can lead the world and become a global brand. Well, we want to make that brand sizzle, so you got 6 months. And then I'd also give them a little pep talk on Dink's 5 Ds of time management. First off, you deliberate. You grew up in a Baptist church, you're going to pray about it. Next, you're going to do it, or you're going to delegate it. If you're not going to do that, then you're going to ditch it, but you dang sure ain't going to diddle around. You want to get that done. So we got 6 months, folks. We got 6 months to get it done. Yes, we can have a global brand, but we need to decide, what is Georgia going to be when it grows up? Well, Abram, I've really enjoyed being with you here today, and I've enjoyed so far representing the 10th Congressional District and all the other millions of Georgians on the Board of Regents. But I'm looking at that clock on the wall, and I'm reminded of what Marilyn Monroe once said. She said, I've been on a calendar, but I've never been on time. Well, my time is just about up, so I want to share with you a lesson that I learned back in about 1958, growing up in the back end of NeSmith Funeral Home in Jesup. With my long arms, my dad thought I was a godsend. I could tote 8 pot plants from the sanctuary to the grave before the family ever got there. And we lived, NeSmith Funeral Home was so close to the railroad tracks in the heart of Jesup that when the fast trains from Miami to New York came by, pictures would shake off the wall, lids on pots would rattle off the pots in the cabinets of my mother's kitchen. Well, that rail yard was a tremendous playground, despite what our mothers would say. They'd say, stay out of that rail yard, stay out of that rail yard, because it's dangerous, you'll get hurt. Well, Alan, you know what you're going to do if your mama says don't do it. You're going to have to try it, aren't you? Well, that's what we were doing one morning. A group of boys in that neighborhood were out on a rail walking like this, trying to see how far we could go. That's when my buddy Joe Phelps came over to me. He was a leader, a visionary leader. He said, listen, let's bet them we can walk right here from NeSmith Funeral Home and Cobb and Oil all the way past Peed and Bramlett, Strickland Feed and Seed, Collier Brothers Fertilizer Spreader, Littlefield Furniture, to the Y, down at the Wayne County Stockyard, the Y. This way we went to Jacksonville, this way we went to Waycross. And he says, we're going to bet them we ain't going to fall off. Not only are we not going to fall off going, we're not going to fall off coming back. I said, Joe, we can't do that. He said, oh, yeah, we can do it. I got a plan. He said, not only are we going to do it, when we do it, we're going to have them buy us a top cola from Dave's First Street Grocery. Y'all have top colas? This was bottled in Savannah. It was 3 full glasses, a half a quart. This is the granddaddy or grandmother, if you will, of the 2-liter drink. Well, for a nickel, I said, Joe, we ain't even got 2 nickels to rub together. We can't buy these boys drinks. He said, we ain't buying. Well, y'all didn't drink. Did y'all drink? Abram, you have these in Augusta? You know why you don't have them today? Because it tastes like carbonated cod liver oil. It was awful. But it was a nickel, and that's about what we could afford when we had a nickel. And then you got to run your hand down into icy, crushed ice waters of that drink box and pull it out. If you had $1, Lord, you'd wanted to climb in that thing on a dog day, hot summer afternoon, wouldn't you, Alan? Well, I said, Joe, we can't do it. He said, yes, we are. When he announced that to our buddies, they started laughing. They said, ain't no way you can do it. Ain't no way you can do it. Well, Ham, this is what we did. He said, okay, you get over here on this rail. I got on this rail. He said, now I'm going to get over here on this one. He got over here on this one. He said, now stick out your hand. He stuck out his hand. You know what we did? We clamped on. We made a team. We offered support to each other and helped to do something that neither one of us could do right by ourselves. That is what I'm challenging the state of Georgia to do. Augusta's got to reach over to Athens. Athens got to reach to Atlanta. Atlanta's got to reach over to Columbus. We got to reach up to Rome, down to Valdosta, Savannah. We all got to join together because teamwork really does work. we've got to pull together. And we can not only go to tomorrow, we can go to the days beyond tomorrow with our global brand. And I believe that there's a bigger mission than our mission statement with the Board of Regents. It said creating a more educated Georgia. Well, I think that's important. But what's really important is creating employment for those better educated Georgians and jobs. If we can help through this branding initiative to create more jobs for our 10 million Georgians, we're all going to be better off. So that's what I'm saying. We've got to work together. Teamwork really works. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to run fast, Philip, run alone. If you want to run far, run together. That's what we've got to do. 10 million Georgians have got to reach out, join together our forces, find our brand, stoke the fires, make it sizzle, and make a better and more prosperous Georgia. But it's not going to be easy, Dean. That's why I leave you with advice my friend gives his wife just before she goes to the beauty shop. Good luck to you.
Answer some questions? Okay, well, Dink has agreed to answer some questions. We are recording this for our website, so please, if you've got a question, raise your hand. We'll bring a microphone over to you. It'll make sure that everybody in the room hears you. It'll also get that recorded for people who are watching it off the web. So if you've got a question, raise your hand. We'll get a mic to you.
That's another reason I was proud that Abram and Cookie came. They can answer these questions if. And the first question I want you to answer is, what is Georgia's brand going to be?
Well, Dink, you mentioned education. Can education indeed be Georgia's brand? And if you look at the number of colleges and great institutions that we have right here in Georgia, how do we compare to the rest of the country?
We have been, Alan, we have been the envy of the nation. Our system has worked very, very well. Folks come to see how we do it. What we have been up against in the last few years is the same thing your family, my family, and the other families been faced with. Our needs, which would be enrollment, has been going this way, and in the last 4 years we've seen a 25% decline in state funding in our institutions, and that 25% drop is because the state simply doesn't have the money. But we have learned to do more with less. That's what we do in our homes, and that's what we're doing here. We rank very, very well. Now, you got Georgia and you got Tech are in the top 25. When we recruited Dr. Ricardo Aziz to come run the Medical College of Georgia, now Georgia Health Sciences University, I said, I was in the interview and I said, Dr. Aziz, whoever comes, you've got to know that the Medical College of Georgia has got to be among the top tier in the country. We're not there yet. We're a long way from there. But he said, give us 10 years and we can do it. And in recent months, I've said, Ricardo, what about 6 years? Can you get it done in 6? Well, that's what we have some great institutions. Again, to have one of 4 states in the country that got 2 or more is pretty impressive. But I want 3, and then Georgia State, we want them there too. So I won't be satisfied until we have all 4. That's me personally. Yes.
I support your branding. I think it's a great idea, but I have a couple questions. How can you reconcile your plans with the fact that the percentage of state support for University of Georgia, for example, is probably at historical low levels right now, and it's been declining over the last 10 years to where it is now? It doesn't look like the General Assembly is in any kind of framework to increase that money coming to the Board of Regents. They're not supporting public education. And secondly, they're not supporting the Georgia Research Alliance as they have, as the previous governors have and legislators have. So it looks like the legislators are leading Georgia in another direction other than the direction that you think it should go in. How are you going to be able to reconcile that? And do you think, as a follow-up, do you think that having Hank Huckabee as the next board, Board of Regents, the chancellor of the university system, being a political appointee almost, de facto political appointee, is really going to be allow the Board of Regents to operate independently and effectively?
Well, you share a lot of the same concerns that I share, and if you had been sitting around the table discussing this casually with me and other members of the Board of Regents for the last couple of years, well, it sounds like you've been sitting there. It does. We do have our challenge there. First off, yes, the state in this economic environment has had less money to put in to the university system. We had a formula funding that used to be tied to enrollment, but that's really been out the window in the last 12 months. Again, that's part of our role as the 18 members of the Board of Regents to do what we can to raise that up. There was a feeling among some under the Gold Dome that there was a disconnect from the Board of Regents to the General Assembly, and so there was some interest in, when our Chancellor retired, to bring in someone who could repair that. And Hank will have, he will have a good impact on that. Now, yes, there are some politicians, elected officials that wanted him very much, but he was chosen by the Board of Regents. He'll do a great job. He's recruited Steve Wrigley to come over from UGA to work. He'll be kind of the second in command. Steve is a wizard under the Gold Dome, back to the Zell Miller days. That will be very, very helpful. We have our work cut out for us, but I don't believe we can just sit and wait till times get better to start thinking about around the corner what we want to do. Now is the time. Charles Dickens, these are the worst of times, these are the best of times. So we've got our work cut out for us. I want you to know, though, that the Board of Regents pays its members $125 a day per diem and then travel expenses. But many of the regents are just like me, who have said, we don't want to dine. We love the state of Georgia. We can provide our own hotel. We can provide our own gas. And if we can do that, we can certainly give our time. So you've got a lot of regents that are buying into that. If you'll be patient with us and you'll help us, we'll get there, because to run far, we got to run together. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your talk. It's
You're
quite
quite
inspiring.
welcome. Thank you.
The gentleman over here mentioned education as a focus,
Yes, ma'am.
and we talked about the limitations of state funding. I'm wondering if you throw research into that, biomedical, if not biotech, then you'd have more, perhaps, would you have more federal funding? Would you have more venture capital, and therefore a better chance of getting this
Yes,
off the
ma'am.
ground?
Go back to, maybe it was Abram mentioned engineering, bringing engineering to the University of Georgia. It was tied. I was chairman of academic affairs, and when it got to me as the chairman, the last person, but it was tied 8-8. So 9-8, we were able to bring engineering. One of the reasons that we need more engineering is so that we can educate more Georgians. There's a shortage of engineers, many believe. And ever since Alan Paulson put the Grumman plant in Savannah, he started howling in the early 80s, we need more engineers, and he wanted an engineering program at Georgia Southern in that part of the region. Well, when you look at the research dollars and relating to engineering, do you know where the University of Georgia ranked receiving those funds? You have any idea? Only people behind us were Mississippi and the University of Alaska. We were like 98, and Tech was up around maybe in the top 25. I said, holy smokes, we're leaving lots of dollars on the table. We've got to be able to attract more research dollars to our state of Georgia. We do. Yes, ma'am. And you'll have my email address. Any ideas that you got, we'll take them. we'll take them, because we're looking for all of us to help solve this challenge. Yes?
To elaborate on your question, given that I was looking at something the other day, when you have states like Alabama, which only has 80 counties, the state of Georgia has 159 counties, which is the largest state of the east of the Mississippi River. Why hasn't it taken us so long to possibly bring in another engineering program, another school, given that it does bring dollars? The state of Alabama has an engineering program at Alabama. They've got one at Tuskegee, and they've got one at Auburn. We just only have pretty much Mercer and Tech. And when I was talking to someone the other day at Tech, like you were saying, when they do go up to Washington and other places, they generally get a little bit more federal funding because of their engineering and things of that nature.
Well, engineering has been brewing forever. Many people said, well, this is brand new. Well, no, it's not. I mentioned Alan Paulson with the airplane plant, Gulfstream, down in Savannah. He began 25 years ago when he was alive, 30 years ago, talking about that. It has bubbled up on numerous occasions for us to have more engineering in Georgia, and it was always politically put back. But I have to give the real credit to this initiative now to Willis Potts, who is a Georgia Tech graduate, an engineer, retired vice president of Temple Inland. He knows engineering. He's from Rome. He studied this for over a year, drove tens of thousands of miles all over the state studying, and he recommended to the Board of Regents that we bring more engineering to Georgia. And then some of us decided, well, we're not really running for re-election. The state's not paying us. We're giving us our time. So we're going to vote what we think is the right thing to do. And as you can see, 9-8 was the vote to bring engineering to Georgia Southern and the University of Georgia. So it could have been debated for another 30 years if it had been allowed to, but we thought it was time to bring it to a head. So you're right. We're behind, but we're trying to catch up. Other questions? Yes.
I don't know anything about engineering at all, but my understanding of engineering is it has grown in dimension, including medical research, all sorts of is that part of what you discussed?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's not all just about building roads and bridges.
Yeah, well, to me, that's a great expanding thought that could encompass our goals.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Engineering in all regards could be.
Well, we're excited about it because engineers are much like the medical community. They're magnets for economic activity. They create wealth, if you will, for Georgians. They bring prosperity, and we need more engineers, and we're on the fast track now to make that happen.
I moved from Atlanta to Marietta, and I joined the Sunday school class, and all of the engineers from Lockheed are in that Sunday school.
Yes, sir.
But it is a smart, well-thinking, clear-thinking group of people, and I think engineering is I have a lot more regard for it than I did when I moved up there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, we were talking about earlier, somebody was talking about we need to get more science-oriented folks to come up to the Terry College and take more of the dean's classes. And I said, well, I tell you what, when I finished my sciences, I didn't walk, I sprinted across the bridge. And I never looked back. I didn't want to go back down there. And Ms. Nanelle Bacon, who is 90-something years old, tells my children today, your daddy almost flunked 7th grade math. They said, well, why, Ms. Bacon? Because he couldn't do decimals. And then I told him to put a dollar mark in front of him. He never missed another problem. I said, well, Ms. Bacon, I didn't understand what they're for. I just didn't know what you were supposed to use those decimals for. But, you know, yes, those engineers are smart, and we need a bunch of them. Dean, thank you so much.
Dink, thanks so much. On behalf of our alumni board, I'd like to present you with this glass sculpture by a local artist, Loretta Eby.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
coming and
Thank
talking
you.
and answering questions.
My pleasure. Thank you.